I'd like you to tell us how you would instruct, let's say, the present US administration or Europe to deal diplomatically with Putin. I don't mean in detail, but in some general approach.
Right. No, I think that's an excellent and very timely question. Let me begin, oddly, by quoting the founder of the Umayyad dynasty, Muawiyah, whose adage called Muawiyah's hair is part of the legacy of Islamic statecraft, and it's very relevant. He said, "I do not apply my sword where my lash suffices, nor my lash where my tongue is enough. And even if there be one hair binding me to my fellow men, I do not let it break. When they pull, I loosen, and if they loosen, I pull." And there are many bits of wisdom buried in that. First, that force is the last resort. It is a possibility. Second, that there are gradations of force. Third, that maintaining contact and influence, dialogue, is the preferred method. And finally, that you should never lose contact with the enemy, which is also a military adage. If you do lose contact, you risk surprise. You become uninformed about the thinking of the enemy or the adversary, and you make mistakes. In the case of Ukraine, we should, in my view, spend a great deal less time demonstrating our self-righteous outrage over Mr. Putin's actions, which are in some respects outrageous, and a great deal more time thinking about what it is that we want. What is it that the United States and Europe, or Russia as well, need in Ukraine? And I submit that what we need is a viable Ukrainian state, which has not been in existence since 1991. Second, that viable state has to be removed from East-West contention. That requires a prosperous, independent, neutral Ukraine. Now, is it impossible to arrange that with Mr. Putin and his Russia? I don't think so, because in 1956, when relations between the Soviet Union and the United States, France, and Britain were vastly worse than they are now between us and Moscow, we arranged something called the Austrian State Treaty, which created an independent Austria, neutralized it, kept it out of NATO, and gave it a prosperous international identity that was beneficial to everyone. So part of diplomacy is thinking about what is it that you really need. Can you contrive a situation where that is also in the interest of those of your opponents? Can you serve the interests of your opponents as you serve your own, and thereby create a situation that is stable and which all sides consider desirable, or at least preferable to the alternatives? In the case of Ukraine, there are disconnects between the United States and our European allies, and they're precisely over these issues. There is a good reason that the German foreign minister and Mrs. Merkel are the two people most active in trying to find a solution to the Ukraine, and not us. Because we have gone out of our way to call Mr. Putin all sorts of names. Generally speaking, at least in my experience, if you have a problem with someone, a neighbor perhaps, maybe their dog is misbehaving or they're throwing trash on the lawn, you are much more likely to solve it if you invite them to a discussion than if you stand on the other side of the road when they come out of church and give them the finger, which is pretty much what we've done with Russia. So I don't have any admiration for Mr. Putin's performance, which is full of mistakes. But I think there are solutions to be had if we apply ourselves to finding them.